Hey, this is Tobin Richardson, CEO of the Zigbee Alliance, and I'm here today with Brad Reed, the CTO of the Ioxt Alliance. And here today to talk about security in the IoT and some of the great things that Ioxt is up to. So let me introduce Brad, and Brad, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hey there, Tobin and everyone listening. I'm Brad Reed, the CTO of the Ioxt Alliance, and I'm happy here to talk about security.
Awesome. Well, Brad, I know you have a very long and really good background in security, network systems, and networks in general. Really exciting to have you talking to us today. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about the Ioxt and its purpose and mission within the IoT.
Sure. So the Ioxt Alliance, what we really were founded from is a bunch of leading manufacturers, ecosystems, retailers, and network operators to try to address the core security concerns that consumers were having that was potentially slowing down adoption of IoT. So where we really look though is we're more focused on the products and services level, and then we work really closely with our protocol and communication partners in the channel and everything, such that Zigbee takes care of getting the communications in between devices and to the hubs, but we take a look at things like security expiration dates and transparency and driving the cloud to device, the mobile app to cloud, these kind of things. So that's sort of where we're really sitting. I will say the one thing that is interesting and challenging for us is, as you look at all the things in IoT, we're really looking at how do you scale this security certification program across things, literally from light bulbs to cell phones, dog collars to building controls. So these are the kind of things that we address. I'll even say we did try to go as far as we were going to certify a fire truck. But as we tried to stretch our security principles to the fire truck, we realized that things like security and usability, we decided that having firemen have to call tech support for a password, we'd probably lower the security bar for them so they can get moving quicker. But these are literally the kind of things that we're trying to address.
That's great. Yeah, that's probably a good choice on the fire truck. We have a lot of different kinds of device types that we've defined in the Zigbee world as well. I don't know that we have fire trucks, but we have some pretty interesting ones in there as well. Maybe not yet certified, but no, that's great. That's a great background. Thank you. And as we look at where the Zigbee Alliance is with hundreds of millions of devices out today, secure, whether that's in smart grid or in light bulbs to smart homes, we are certainly finding that security is always one of those key factors in delivering a good experience for consumers, whether they're utilities or end consumers. And it's been a mainstay for our members as we get into the chip project now, as we get into neighborhood area networks, as we get into new areas of development. It's going to be even more important. And full disclosure for folks listening, we have a liaison with the Ioxt Alliance and enjoy a good kind of cross section of members, but also this really strong commitment to top level security for all applications. And if we're really going to get to the hundreds of billions of devices that we know are coming, really that has to be baked in from the beginning, and it has to have a really wide view in terms of how that's implemented, how it's used, and the kinds of companies. I know when we first started interacting with Ioxt, it was really under the guise of looking forward, like you said, how to remove hurdles to developing the market. And one of those first conversations really revolved around this notion of a security pledge to consumers and to manufacturers and developers. Maybe you could talk about kind of how that's evolved and what the security pledge is for Ioxt and how that factors into the mission.
Yeah, absolutely. So you are absolutely right. We started out talking around a security pledge, building out what are the 8 core principles that all devices, products, services should have in the IoT. But then, it really sort of consolidated and it comes down to 3 core things, security, upgradability, and transparency. So all of our 8 are really centered around that. How we really came up with that, though, was we did a couple different things. One, we looked at what the leading manufacturers were doing, right? So the guys who are really at the top of the peak for security, what is it that they do? So we drew a lot of inspiration from that. We then also really looked at what it takes to get into different managed networks, into ecosystems. So the goal was consolidate those requirements so that there's one set of security requirements to enter all these channels. And then the last thing that we really did was we took a look at what was happening at the global regulation side. So what we wanted to make sure is that whatever we're trying to lay down and drive towards, it lines up with regulations, and surprisingly, each of these governments are all working away. Yes, they're trying to collaborate, but they still have their own different focuses. So we sort of tried to weave between the more device security side from the United States versus the more consumer-centric transparency side of the European Union, and take an industry-led approach to build out these standards. The other real important thing that we did, though, is yes, we started with a security pledge, but then what was really important, and just like Zigbee, having a compliance program to measure and communicate clearly to consumers what it is that they're getting. So that's how we morphed into an actual compliance program where we use third-party test labs and some other interesting approaches to scale this thing to handle the hundreds of thousands of different types of devices that are being deployed every year. So that's really where we're at now.
Great. I want to talk about that Cert program but first, before we do, those 8 principles and kind of 3 areas, that's a framework and a structure. Other organizations and companies have kind of their own view. Have you seen that 8 really challenged or validated, or how's that evolved over the last couple of years from your perspective? And do you find that that's hitting the right mark? Is it a little short? Are there areas for kind of exploration?
Yeah, so out of our eight items, almost everyone now is aligned with things like no fixed password and securing interfaces and stuff like that. The one that is actually more interesting and where we see some slight controversy is around security expiration dates. So being upfront about how long you're going to support your products. Most companies, of course, will support them. They have end of life notices. But what we really see is Europe is really driving hard at some form of statements up front, letting consumers know when they're buying products. There was even discussions at one point of putting a expiration date on the packages. Now that's a regulator side. We do not advocate that. We're looking for more of a middle ground that we do have our smart cert with a QR code so that we can communicate to customers, but we don't go printing actual dates that cause churn in the stores. So that is probably the most interesting, controversial side of the 8 pledges so far.
Well, yeah, I know the UK has been wrestling with that, and certainly we've talked about this concept for a long time. It's kind of like the expiration date you have on produce in your house. You know when it's good and when it's not good, and certainly that's something folks need to think about. So that's great. Well, let's turn a little bit to the Cert program. So can you talk a little bit, after you've kind of evolved here, about the Ioxt certification program and how devices are measured against the security pledge?
Yeah, so we got a couple different things that we do in our Cert program. One, we've got the more traditional authorized labs and everything. And so, we've got several different security labs that manufacturers can submit their products to go, get evaluated against the pledge and test cases and everything else. But the other big thing is, as we started looking at how do we scale the Works With program, right? As more and more devices come through, and I mentioned the dog collar, and yeah, we actually have a certified cellular dog collar. So these are traditionally more of the long tail on the IoT side. And what we did for that is, some of these products, their volumes aren't quite at the same kind of level, so full up lab certification becomes a challenge for them. So one of the things that we really did was we did a manufacturer self-certification, but what we really did was we took our transparency approach, and we have part of our security pledge is a vulnerability disclosure program that ultimately, when you reach the highest level of that, there's a bug bounty where you basically give researchers rewards for finding problems. So we took that same approach. If it's good enough for products, we said, let's put a bug bounty on our certification data. So now anyone who can come in, they can make statements against the security of their product, but we counterbalance it with university researchers, security researchers, so that, you know, if someone makes a mistake or maybe stretches their levels a little bit far, researchers can come in, we work with them, and we address those problems. So that helps keep the self-certification program whole. The other really important thing that we do is we really are focused at products and services. So we really count on the underlying protocols to be secured. So we have, one of our principles is you have to have secured interfaces. In that principle, we actually we have our manufacturers state, you know, what protocols are you running? And if you're a certifiable protocol, such as Zigbee, we then ask for the Zigbee certification, because really what we do is we recognize our close partners, you know, Zigbee Alliance, and you guys have a whole lot of testing around interoperability, the security of the protocol, you know, these kind of things. So we ride that in. If someone is Zigbee certified, they then pass quite a few of our certification requirements. And then there's just sort of more operational things like expiration dates and vulnerability disclosures. So these are how we sort of layer on top of different programs.
Yeah, I was going to ask you how you think this kind of works with or works in conjunction with certification programs like the Zigbee certification program. And it sounds like that's a prerequisite, and it's, you know, it's a precursor to getting into that. And certainly what you described in terms of, you know, secure interfaces, that's a, you know, core component of Zigbee certification, and certainly on the security side within the Zigbee Alliance, we have a security advisory group. Love the vulnerability program that you talked about. We launched an updated version on our website to make sure that we're even more out there, and really, you know, I think this emulates the important notion that we really have to embrace security, not be afraid of it. And you're certainly not going to be able to hide from it, especially as we get into so many different interfaces, so many different market segments as well. So having said that, you know, how do you consider the Ioxt Cert program to be unlike traditional Cert programs then?
Yeah, so one of the big differences is, of course, it's layering, right? Is what we don't want to do is we don't want to have to create extra work for people. So we really do try to work very closely, you know, like I said, with the Zigbee Alliance. If you're Zigbee certified, a whole lot of this you end up getting pulled through. So our goal was to avoid the not invented here, be more collaborative, and you know, work together. The other big thing, though, that makes us really different is we are, you know, we have this self-certification approach, but we also have this QR code and a lot of transparency with different levels, so that as a consumer comes in, they can do a quick scan, they can see if this thing's certified, and then if they choose to go deeper and deeper, they can see, okay, well, to what level is the secured interface? How long do you support the product? But, you know, then it takes you down into a deeper kind of thing that you can see, you know, the strength of some of the password protections, certificate based, but we don't take that at the very top, right? So we try to make it very simple, that there's one stamp that means it's secured for use, you know, no colors, no numbers, nothing like that. We avoided the chiclet problem, right? We want to make sure it's certified. But then we do want to make sure for the advanced users or for the buyers who are populating their channel, they have the tools there to get deeper.
That's great. I think that describes well kind of the approach, the pledge, the principles, how that then ties to a CERT program, how you've evolved that and taken that to kind of a place where that's really usable for consumers and also understandable in terms of the process and the methodology for developers. And certainly, you know, as we know, the IoT is complex. The more we can keep these things simple, understandable, but useful, we're going to be in a good place. So that's really important. If we move away from kind of the CERT programs, let's take a track to global regulation. So I know Ioxt is, you know, your focus is security, and really being in the market and supporting that. But I understand you also track global regulation on security. What are some of the near-term ones you're looking at, and what's going on there, and why are they important to device manufacturers?
Yeah, we are very engaged on the regulatory side. Ever since the Mirai botnet attack, where they turned cameras into denial of service and shutting down things, most governments sort of woke up, recognized that consumer products potentially could play a role in the next cyber war, right? So what we really do though is we're focused a lot in North America and Europe. With North America, we track a lot, participate a lot with NIST. We see a lot of the work in NIST actually now also moving up into ISO. And another one that I want to give as an interesting note that people should watch is the Solarium Commission. So this is actually it's more of a Department of Defense, more of a military focus. These guys traditionally were chartered back in like the Eisenhower days to win the next Cold War, the space race and the Cold War. They've now been sort of recommissioned to look at how to win the next cyber war. But they've taken some really interesting looks over into what consumer electronics and connected products. What makes them really sort of interesting from a regulatory side is that they actually jump in and they go a little bit deeper, where they actually not only come up with recommendations, but then they write potential bills and shop it around Congress. So these are some groups that we very much pay attention to in North America. In Europe, we really see a strong leadership coming out of definitely the UK, Germany, and France. UK sort of leading the way with introducing some government regulations that they're actually talking about putting some hard requirements for anything sold in the UK. They've also rolled things up into Etsy. And then more important, what we see is probably in the next year to two, Enisa is sitting on the side watching what's happening, seeing if industry can provide some good security standards. And if not, then they're going to jump in with European-wide regulations. So, we really, we encourage the governments to provide the broad bumpers, but then, we really take a industry-led approach to try to keep that balanced.
That makes a lot of sense. I know one of our core missions is ensuring that we have consistent standards that are universally applicable, so that a device manufacturer has to build once. Do you see? It sounds like in North America and UK and Europe, there's some coordination there. Do you feel like we're going to see a place where product manufacturers are going to have to, because of the security requirements, go back to building 10 different devices for 10 different markets?
So that is one of our core missions at the Ioxt Alliance, is to try to stop that from happening. The thing that I'll share is, so if you take a look in California, really led with State Bill 327, said no fixed passwords and reasonable security. Reasonable security is an issue because that's an open-ended thing, but the no fixed passwords I'll pick on here for a second, because what ended up happening was, so California went out of the chute. Oregon jumped in and said, hey, our neighbors to the south, that's a pretty good idea, but I'm going to change it to make it better. And then as it rippled across, there's about 4 or 5 different versions of this bill, where even in Virginia, there's a version that says that no fixed password has to have so many characters, so many numbers, right? They start actually in legislating, password equations. And I got to tell you, as a global light bulb manufacturer, do you really want to try to figure out if your light bulb passes the Mississippi password check, right? So that's going to be a recipe for disaster. And that really is one of our core missions, is try to harmonize that, try to prevent any kind of fragmentation. Takes a lot of time and energy. I do believe that the governments, they don't want to fragment the global market, but sometimes, they just may not be talking to all the parties.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, right? So they want to listen to you. They hopefully are listening to all the parties. The companies that comprise your board and are involved with and supporting Ioxt is a pretty impressive roster. What organizations are involved in Ioxt in helping to steer the Alliance work forward to really secure the Internet of Things?
Yeah, so what we've got is Quite a few different folks here. So, on the Google and Amazon side, both the guys who are part of the Nest team and the Lab 126, but then also the Android guys are engaged. So, there's a lot of cellular activity and things like that. We also have operators such as T-Mobile and Comcast involved. Then, even some other non-traditional manufacturers such as Facebook is involved, right? So we've got right now over 250 member companies all working together to drive this. And it really is, it's smart home, smart building, cellular IoT, and connected cars. That's the kind of stuff we're focused on.
And you think that's resonating with different governments as they look to industry to understand kind of who they should be talking to as they form their regulations?
Well, I'll say, right, it wasn't too long ago, Google, Amazon, Facebook, and Apple all were talking to the governments about some of their positions in technology. So yes, I believe that some of these players are involved.
Fair enough. On the Zigbee Alliance side, for our members or product manufacturers in general, really, why would they be interested in Ioxt? What stage of, and certainly I think they should be, obviously, but what stage in product development should they really begin engaging with Ioxt?
So from a security standpoint, you should always get involved at the beginning. Security should be designed in at the whole start. Now, with that really being said, though, the other thing is what we really are trying to do is, as long as you're following industry best practices from security, we actually find that many of our leading manufacturers, there's very little things that they have to change, and they're almost all focused on organizational reporting. It's mostly around that transparency kind of piece. So, they can be definitely involved at the beginning, drive it in through their engineering teams, but also at the very end of the process, making sure that you're aligned to global regulations and limiting your liabilities is a pretty important thing.
That's good. Yeah. And it is important, designing in security. And certainly I know within the Zigbee Alliance, that's been a fundamental tenet for us and our members, that, security is always job one. And interesting kind of, as you look at design principles, I know on the smart energy side, that was one of the things that we always looked at, is we assumed every device is going to be hacked. And so, if you know that it's going to be, when attacked, two, it's going to be successfully violated, what can you do to slow down that process? What can you do to recover? So there are different components to that. And that kind of is a methodology and a mental state kind of helps form and formulate a really good approach to designing the standard underneath there, and as well as the networks that it's going to go into.
Yep. Yeah, we really talk about security is really, once again, it's not a product, it's a process. And that actually is another thing I forgot to mention in our certification process. What we really do in our process is it's a living certification. So not only are we working with the researchers, but we request from the manufacturers information about what software, what chipsets, what security libraries. And then the Alliance provides a bunch of monitoring tools that we go out and we monitor vulnerability databases. We monitor news feeds around the products that are certified and their competitors' products. So if someone's light bulb gets hacked, you as another light bulb manufacturer may care to take a look, because there may be a similar attack on the horizon there. And then the other piece that we do is we actually go out to several of the dark websites on some of the vulnerability marketplaces to see what vulnerabilities are for sale for the hackers, and then try to provide that information back to our members. So yeah, it's definitely, security is not a static target at all.
Well, that's great, and I think what we've talked about today shows that Ioxt is very much a very strong partner for product manufacturers and companies as we build this market together. And we, I think based on the really fast growth that you're experiencing, you're seeing both an interest in that, but also validation that the way that you guys are structuring this is really the right direction, and we're excited to be working with you, and excited for our members to be able to kind of tap into everything that you're doing on the security side, we know that will just be additive to building this IoT market. So, on that point, we've talked about the security pledge, we've talked about the certification program, kind of how Ioxt works on that side, some of the regulatory, because you can't talk about security without knowing what's going on in the regulatory environment. Anything else we should share with our members today that would be useful?
Yeah, so one thing that I think you'll see, we took our core baseline principle, and then we build these device and market specific profiles. So what we've really been doing is, continuing to expand, sharpen our pencil around, smart speakers as a great example. There, what extra unique challenges face that? We've got a camera profile that we're working on, but you'll see a lot more of these more interesting market profiles come on up as we engage with different retailers and channels. So that's one of the core things that we're really looking to do is, help drive adoption by helping channels that may not have had security requirements, providing it to them, and then bringing this balance between the manufacturer and the channel owner, so that we get reasonable security levels, right? Not just high enough security to protect the consumer, but also security which can be implemented at a reasonable price on a global scale. So these are some of the kind of things we're working on.
That's great. Well, I guess that wraps us up for this discussion. I really appreciate it. For folks that want to learn more about the Ioxt, you can go to ioxtalliance.org and learn a lot more there, and I certainly encourage you to do so. If you are a Zigbee Alliance member, join our security group, and you'll learn a lot more there, as well as we have some good interaction with Ioxt on that side. So Brad, I want to thank you so much for taking the time today and talking a bit more about security and IoT. And we have our work cut out for us, but we've got the right folks and the right organization. So appreciate it again.
Yeah, thanks a lot so much, Tobin. You have a good day.
You too.